It was still pitch dark when my phone started vibrating nonstop on the nightstand, the kind of sound that hits your chest before your eyes even open. When I finally stepped outside, boots crunching in fresh snow, I saw them immediately. Bright orange HOA violation notices slapped across my mailbox and taped to my driveway post like crime scene markers. According to the HOA, I was guilty of unauthorized snow removal activities. That alone was absurd. But the last line made my hands shake. Cease all snow clearing immediately, or face daily fines and legal action. What they didn't understand was simple. I wasn't clearing snow as a hobby. I was the reason our roads stayed open at all. Every storm, I was out there before sunrise, carving a path so ambulances could get through, so school buses wouldn't slide into ditches, so neighbors could make it to work. Even the county salt trucks depended on the road I kept passable. And now, in the middle of the worst winter Pine Hollow County had seen in decades, the HOA wanted me to stop. Standing there in the freezing air, that paper crumpled in my glove, I had no idea this would end in a courtroom, with county records spread across a judge's desk and years of corruption finally dragged into the light. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button to HOA Update. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I have lived in Pine Hollow County almost my entire life. My parents moved here when I was still a kid, back when the place was nothing but scattered homes, pine trees, and one long gravel access road that twisted up through the hills. That road was here long before anyone ever said the letters H-O or A out loud. It was how we got groceries, how kids made it to school, how emergency vehicles reached us when something went wrong. It was never fancy, but it worked, because people took care of it. My father was one of those people. Every winter, without anyone asking him, he hooked up his old plow and cleared that road after every storm. He believed in doing what needed to be done, especially when others depended on it. When he passed away several years ago, there was never a meeting or a vote about who would take over. I just did it. Same truck, upgraded plow, same sense of responsibility. I never charged anyone. I never sent invoices. I saw it as community duty, plain and simple. Years later, that's when the neighborhood changed. New houses started popping up, tighter together, owned by people who liked paperwork more than handshakes. That's when the Homeowners Association was formed. They came in with bylaws, board positions, and a long list of rules that applied mostly to lawns, paint colors, and mailbox styles. At first, I barely noticed them. They didn't bother me, and I didn't bother them. Then Linda Harrell moved in. Linda arrived like she was taking command of hostile territory. She was freshly elected HOA president within months, and suddenly there were new rules no one remembered agreeing to. She talked about authority, liability, and compliance, like she had memorized a script. It wasn't long before that script included me. The first letter showed up in my mailbox on a clear afternoon, long before the snow even started falling. The wording was stiff and cold, accusing me of operating heavy machinery on HOA-controlled infrastructure without authorization. It felt surreal reading it. I remember standing in my kitchen, rereading the sentence over and over, trying to understand how clearing snow had somehow become a violation. I did what any reasonable person would do. I emailed the board calmly. I explained the history of the road. I told them my father had maintained it for decades and that I had county documentation showing it wasn't solely under HOA control. I even offered to come to a meeting and walk them through everything, permits and all. The response came back short and dismissive. Linda replied, "Not the board, not a committee, just her." She told me the HOA would review the matter and instructed me to stop snow clearing until further notice. No discussion. No questions, just an order. When winter finally arrived, it arrived hard. Snow piled up fast, and within days the road was nearly impassable. That's when the fines started. Notices taped to my door. warnings about daily penalties, threats of liens. They even claimed they were going to hire a private contractor to handle snow removal. The problem was, we had tried that before. Contractors either showed up late, charged ridiculous amounts, or refused to come back after one storm. Everyone in the neighborhood knew it. The HOA ignored that reality completely. As storms rolled in, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors called in panic, asking if I was still clearing the road. Some whispered, afraid of being overheard, like this was some kind of underground operation. One woman told me her husband had a medical condition and couldn't risk being snowed in. Another neighbor said the school bus driver had already refused to come up the road if it got any worse. Meanwhile, the HOA sent another letter, this one more aggressive than the last. They accused me of undermining their authority and warned that any further action on my part would result in immediate legal consequences. It felt less like community management and more like a power play. What hurt the most was realizing this was no longer about safety or order. It was about control. Linda didn't care who got stuck or who couldn't get out. She cared about proving that she was in charge. Standing there watching snow pile up again, neighbors calling, and threats stacking up in my mailbox, I knew this wasn't going to end quietly. The HOA had drawn a line in the snow, and whether they realized it or not, they had just turned a simple act of helping into a full-blown fight. Things spiraled faster than I ever expected. What started as warning letters turned into certified envelopes that had to be signed for, the kind that make your heart sink before you even open them. Inside were threats spelled out in stiff legal language. Liens against my property, daily fines that would stack up until they became impossible to ignore. Even a warning that my plow truck could be towed if it was seen engaging in unauthorized activity. One letter accused me of endangering HOA liability coverage, as if clearing snow was some reckless stunt instead of the one thing keeping the road usable. That was the moment it hit me. Logic didn't matter anymore. History didn't matter. Common sense didn't matter. They had decided I was the problem, and no amount of explaining was going to change that. Linda made that painfully clear a few days later. I was out checking the plow, debating whether I could risk another pass before the next storm, when I saw her marching up my driveway. Clipboard tucked under her arm, phone already recording, lips pressed into a thin, practiced smile. She didn't even bother with a greeting. "You are not authorized to touch HOA infrastructure," she said, like she was reading from a script. I told her calmly that the road existed before the HOA, that I had documents to prove it. She didn't blink. "That's not how it works anymore," she replied. "The HOA is in charge now. If you keep this up, you will regret it." The way she said regret sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the cold. Then the storms got worse. Snow came down heavier and faster, the kind that piles up before you can finish clearing the last pass. Within hours, the road narrowed to a single rutted path. Cars slid. Tires spun. One night, an ambulance tried to make it up the hill and got stuck halfway, lights flashing uselessly in the snow. I stood at my window watching, knowing I could fix the problem in minutes, but terrified of what would happen if I did. My phone lit up constantly. Neighbors didn't want to talk openly anymore. They whispered. They asked if I could maybe just do a quick pass, or just clear enough so we can get out. One man knocked on my door late at night and admitted his wife was due to give birth soon. He asked me what he was supposed to do if the road closed. That weight sat on my chest every time I looked outside. If I stopped, people could get hurt. If I continued, I could lose my home. I tried to do the right thing. I requested mediation through the HOA. I attended the next meeting, sitting in a folding chair under harsh fluorescent lights, while the board stared down at me like a jury that had already made up its mind. When I explained myself, Linda cut me off repeatedly. She rolled her eyes when I mentioned county agreements. She laughed when I talked about emergency access. "This meeting is not for debating authority," she said into the microphone. "It's for enforcing it." Then came the vote. Right there, in front of everyone, the board approved daily fines if I touched the road again. The number didn't matter. The message did. They wanted to crush me financially until I backed down. I looked around the room and saw neighbors staring at the floor, afraid to meet my eyes. Nobody spoke up. Nobody voted against it. Fear had done its job. Driving home that night, snow already starting to fall again, I realized how trapped I was. The HOA had weaponized paperwork and intimidation, and they were counting on me to fold quietly. Every option felt wrong. Do nothing and risk lives. Do something and risk everything I owned. That's when I knew this wasn't just a dispute anymore. It was a test. And if I didn't find a way to push back, Linda and the HOA would keep tightening the squeeze until there was nothing left to give. I was loading groceries into my truck after that meeting when someone cleared his throat behind me. I turned around and saw Tom Wheeler standing a few feet away. Tom had lived in Pine Hollow County longer than almost anyone still breathing. He walked with a slow, careful step and spoke softly, like every word was worth weighing first. He didn't say hello. He didn't mention the meeting. He just leaned in slightly and asked, almost like he was sharing a secret, "Have you ever seen the county easement file?" I told him no. I didn't even know what that meant. Tom nodded once, like he expected that answer. Then he said something that flipped a switch in my head. Because that road was never theirs. Not fully. And somebody forgot to tell the HOA. The next morning, instead of hooking up the plow, I drove to the Pine Hollow County Clerk's office. I didn't expect much. At that point, I was tired, frustrated, and honestly just looking for anything that might explain how things had gone so wrong. The building itself was old, quiet, and smelled faintly of paper and dust. A woman behind the counter asked what I was looking for, and when I mentioned the road name, her eyebrows lifted slightly. She disappeared into the back and came out with a thick folder that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside were maps older than the HOA by decades. Hand-drawn lines, stamped approvals, recorded easements granting access and maintenance rights tied directly to the county, not a homeowners association that didn't even exist at the time. There were notes showing emergency access requirements and maintenance allowances tied to safety, not aesthetics or HOA permission. Page by page, the story changed. The road wasn't HOA infrastructure. It never had been. The HOA had authority over certain surface rules, sure, but not control. Not ownership. Not the right to shut down snow clearing that protected emergency access. The realization hit me so hard I had to sit down. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel helpless. I felt focused. I asked questions. I made copies. I requested certified records. The clerk even pointed out something else I hadn't noticed. Several HOA amendments that Linda kept referencing. They were never properly registered with the county. Some weren't recorded at all. Others were filed incorrectly, making them unenforceable outside the HOA's internal paperwork. That explained everything. The confidence, the threats, the refusal to discuss facts. They weren't enforcing real authority. They were bluffing. Over the next few days, I went deeper. I compared HOA letters to county documents and found contradiction after contradiction. Dates didn't line up. Claims didn't match recorded boundaries. The more I looked, the clearer it became. The HOA had been operating on assumption and intimidation, not law. Just as that cautious determination started to feel solid, another envelope arrived. This one was different. Formal letterhead. Legal language. A cease and desist order demanding I immediately stop interfering with HOA-controlled property and warning of imminent legal action if I failed to comply. Linda's signature sat at the bottom like a challenge. I laughed once when I read it. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed everything. They had no idea what I had just uncovered. They thought they were tightening the noose. What they had really done was step directly into the light. And now, With county records in my hands and the truth finally visible, I wasn't backing down anymore. The turning point had arrived, and the fight was officially on. I didn't rush into anything. The records I'd pulled from the county were powerful, but I knew enough to understand that paperwork alone doesn't win fights like this. I needed someone who spoke the language fluently. That's how I ended up sitting across from Mark Ellison, a local attorney who specialized in land use and municipal records. His office was small, quiet, and lined with shelves full of thick binders that looked like they had ended more than a few arguments over the years. I laid everything out on his desk. The HOA letters, the fines, the cease and desist. Then I slid the county documents across to him and watched his expression change as he read. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush. He just nodded slowly, page after page. When he finally looked up, he said, "They don't have the authority they're claiming." Not even close. Hearing that from someone who knew the law felt like air filling my lungs again. Mark explained it clearly. The HOA had been enforcing rules they never legally possessed. Their amendments weren't properly recorded. Their claims over the road didn't hold up against county easements tied to emergency access and maintenance. In short, they were bluffing, and they had been doing it for a long time. Then he surprised me with the plan. "Don't fight them yet," he said. "Let them hang themselves." The strategy felt counterintuitive at first. Publicly comply. Stop clearing snow for a short time. Document everything. Let the consequences unfold naturally. Emergency access issues. Resident complaints. County involvement. Meanwhile, we would quietly prepare for court with certified records and a timeline that showed exactly how reckless the HOA's orders were. It was risky. Every instinct in me screamed that stopping was wrong. But Mark reminded me that the truth had weight, and the system only works when you let it see the damage caused by abuse of authority. So I stepped back. Snow kept falling. Roads narrowed. Cars slid. One morning, the school bus couldn't make it up the hill at all. Parents had to meet it halfway down the road. Another night, a fire truck took nearly twice as long to reach a home because the access route was barely passable. Every incident was logged. Every delay documented. Then came the twist none of us expected. The county issued a notice. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't even addressed to the HOA directly at first. It was an internal inquiry questioning whether a private organization was interfering with emergency access on a road protected by county easements. Someone had noticed. Someone had asked the wrong question in the right office. That's when panic hit the HOA. Linda sent emails accusing me of sabotage. The board sent letters claiming I was intentionally creating dangerous conditions. They demanded explanations. They threatened additional penalties. They even tried to blame me publicly for the road closures, ignoring the fact that they were the ones who ordered me to stop. What they didn't realize was that every accusation helped us. Every email showed intent. Every threat proved overreach. Every complaint from residents and emergency services added weight to the case. The pressure mounted fast. Neighbors who had stayed quiet started speaking up, not to defend me, but to demand answers from the HOA. Why was the road suddenly unsafe? Why were emergency vehicles struggling? Why had the one person who kept it clear been forced to stop? Behind closed doors, the board scrambled. Meetings were called. Decisions were reversed, and then reversed again. Linda tried to assert control, but it was slipping through her fingers. The county's questions didn't go away. They multiplied. By the time Mark filed our response and requested a formal hearing, the situation had become impossible to ignore. What started as an HOA dispute had turned into a public safety issue with a paper trail that led straight back to the board. Snow piled up outside my window, untouched. Phones kept ringing. And while it hurt to watch the road deteriorate, I knew the truth was finally doing its work. The HOA thought they were punishing me. In reality, they were exposing themselves, one angry accusation at a time. The legal fight didn't explode all at once. It crept forward in thick envelopes, formal filings, and court notices stamped with dates that suddenly made everything feel real. Mark handled most of it, but every document I read made my pulse jump. Motions. Responses. Emergency hearings requested because of public safety concerns. What had started as an HOA power trip was now officially a legal matter, and there was no turning back. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse parking lot was packed. I recognized trucks and cars from my own road, neighbors who had never spoken up before, now sitting on wooden benches behind me. Some nodded. Some avoided eye contact. Everyone looked tense. Snow boots left wet prints across the floor, and the low hum of whispers echoed through the room. Linda Harrow arrived like she owned the place. She walked in with the HOA's attorney at her side, chin lifted, shoulders squared, confidence pouring off her like armor. She didn't look at me directly, just passed by as if I wasn't worth acknowledging. Her lawyer set thick folders on the table, and Linda leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, already convinced this would end her way. When the judge entered, the room went still. The HOA's attorney spoke first. He laid out their argument in polished language, insisting the association owned and controlled the road, that my actions had undermined their authority, and that stopping me was necessary to protect liability and order. Linda nodded along, occasionally whispering to him, her expression calm, almost bored. Then Mark stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue emotionally. He simply walked to the table and placed a stack of documents in front of the judge. County plats, recorded easements, maintenance logs dating back decades. He explained the history of the road, who built it, who maintained it, and who had legal authority over it. He pointed out, carefully and methodically, that the HOA's claims relied on amendments that were never properly registered. The judge leaned forward. Questions followed, sharp and precise. When was the HOA formed? When were these amendments recorded? Why did county easements referencing emergency access not appear in the HOA filings? Each question chipped away at the confidence Linda had walked in with. The room felt different now. You could feel it. Neighbors shifted in their seats. The HOA attorney began flipping through his notes faster. Linda stopped nodding. When Mark introduced evidence showing how long the road had been maintained independently of the HOA, the judge paused. She asked for clarification. Mark handed over another document, then another. The silence stretched. It wasn't awkward silence. It was heavy, deliberate silence, the kind that makes every breath sound too loud. I glanced sideways and saw Linda's face change, just slightly. Her jaw tightened, her eyes flicked toward her attorney, then back to the judge. The smugness was gone, replaced by something closer to concern. The judge asked directly whether the HOA had ever received county approval to restrict maintenance related to emergency access. The HOA attorney hesitated. Linda leaned forward, whispering urgently. The answer came back vague, non-committal. That was the moment. The judge closed the folder in front of her and looked up. She ordered an immediate review of the county records, right there, in court. She wanted verification. Not interpretations, not HOA claims. Official confirmation. The room went dead quiet. Linda stared straight ahead, her hands clenched in her lap. Her confidence had drained away, replaced by the realization that this wasn't going the way she planned. The HOA attorney shifted uncomfortably, already sensing the ground slipping beneath them. As court recessed briefly for the records to be reviewed, I sat there, heart pounding, palms damp, barely able to process what was happening. This was no longer about opinions or authority. It was about facts. And for the first time since this nightmare began, the facts were finally speaking louder than threats. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. Linda and the HOA had just lost control of the story. When court resumed, the energy in the room had changed completely. What had started that morning as a confident show of authority from the HOA now felt tense and uncertain. County officials were called to testify, and unlike the HOA witnesses, they came prepared with records, certifications, and timelines that didn't rely on interpretation or opinion. One official laid out the history of the road in plain language. The easements were read aloud. Emergency access requirements were explained. Maintenance rights tied directly to public safety were confirmed. According to the county's own records, the Homeowners Association had never been granted the authority to restrict snow clearing on that road. Not now. Not ever. Then came the part that hit hardest. The official explained that stopping snow removal on a road designated for emergency access was not just misguided, it was dangerous. The county classified the HOA's orders as interference with public access, something no private organization had the right to do. My actions, clearing snow to keep the road open, were not a violation. They were necessary. You could feel it ripple through the courtroom. Neighbors whispered to each other. One woman in the back wiped tears from her eyes. The tension that had been sitting on my chest for months finally started to lift. Then Linda took the stand. At first, she tried to hold on to the same confidence she had walked in with. She repeated her claims about HOA authority, about liability, about rules that needed to be enforced. But the judge didn't let her ramble. She asked direct questions, referencing documents already in evidence. Linda contradicted herself almost immediately. She claimed the amendments gave her authority, but couldn't explain why they weren't properly recorded. She insisted the road was HOA property, then admitted she had never seen the original county plat before that day. She said emergency access was never discussed, only to be confronted with emails she had sent dismissing those exact concerns. Each inconsistency chipped away at her credibility. Her answers grew shorter. Her voice tightened. At one point, she looked back at the HOA attorney as if waiting to be rescued, but there was nothing he could do. The judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. When she spoke, the room went silent. She ruled that the HOA had acted outside its legal authority. She stated clearly that the association had no right to stop snow clearing on the road and that doing so had endangered public safety. The fines issued against me were ordered reversed in full. Any threats of liens or towing were declared invalid. And most importantly, the HOA was stripped of enforcement power over that road entirely. The reaction was immediate. Gasps. Quiet cheers quickly stifled by courtroom decorum. I felt my knees go weak as relief washed over me. Months of stress, fear, and pressure drained away in a single moment. Linda didn't look at anyone as the ruling was read. She stared down at the table, shoulders slumped, the authority she had wielded so aggressively now completely gone. The judge didn't lecture her. She didn't have to. The ruling itself was the lesson. As people filed out of the courtroom, neighbors stopped to shake my hand. Some apologized for staying silent. Others thanked me for not backing down. Outside, snow drifted lightly from the sky, settling quietly on the courthouse steps. Linda walked past me without a word. The power she had tried to enforce through intimidation and paperwork had collapsed under the weight of the truth. The HOA had overreached, and in doing so, they had exposed themselves. What they meant as punishment had become their undoing. For the first time in a long while, I could breathe again. The road would be cleared. The community would be safe. And the message was unmistakable. Authority doesn't come from a clipboard or a title. It comes from the law. And that day, the law had spoken. The first morning I fired up the plow again felt different from every other time I had done it. The engine rumbled to life, steady and familiar, and as I rolled onto the road, the weight that had been pressing on my chest for months finally eased. Snow still lined the edges from the last storm, but this time I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for another notice to appear on my mailbox. I was doing what I had always done, openly and without fear. As I made the first pass, neighbors came out onto their porches. Some waved, some clapped. One man stood at the end of his driveway and gave me a thumbs up that made me laugh out loud for the first time in weeks. People weren't whispering anymore. They weren't afraid of being seen supporting me. The tension that had hung over the neighborhood like a storm cloud finally broke. Within days, the HOA began to unravel from the inside. Emergency meetings were called. Board members distanced themselves from decisions they had voted for. Fingers pointed in every direction except where they belonged. Then the news spread quietly at first, and then everywhere. Linda Harrow had resigned. No dramatic speech, no explanation. Just gone. Her name was removed from the website. Her email stopped responding. The authority she had clung to vanished almost overnight. The association didn't dissolve, but it changed. New board members were elected, ones who actually listened. Rules were reviewed, apologies were issued, some sincere, some awkward, but necessary all the same. Trust didn't come back instantly, but it started to heal. The county didn't stop at the court ruling. Officials finalized the road status, recording everything clearly and permanently. Easements were reaffirmed. Maintenance rights were documented in plain language that left no room for future power plays. Emergency access was formally protected. What had once been assumed was now undeniable. Life settled back into a rhythm. Snowstorms came and went. The road stayed open. Emergency vehicles passed through without trouble. Kids waited safely for the school bus. People stopped to chat again instead of glancing over their shoulders. Every now and then, someone would thank me quietly, usually when no one else was around. They'd say they were sorry for not speaking up sooner. I always told them the same thing. Fear makes people quiet. Standing up takes time. Standing there one afternoon watching fresh snow fall onto a road that finally belonged to the community again, I thought about my father, about how he had cleared this same stretch of road without ever expecting recognition. I realized that what we had fought for wasn't just about snow or authority. It was about fairness, about making sure power didn't go unchecked. Things weren't perfect, but they were better, stronger, clearer. And for the first time since the HOA showed up with its clipboards and threats, Pine Hollow County felt like home again. When everything finally settled, I realized this was never really about snow or even about an HOA. It was about what happens when authority exists without accountability. Titles and clipboards can make people feel powerful, but power without limits always overreaches. What actually matters are facts, records, and the willingness to stand your ground when something feels wrong. There were plenty of moments when backing down would have been easier. When the letters piled up, when the fines were threatened, when fear kept people quiet. But communities don't stay safe when everyone looks the other way. They stay safe when someone is willing to say no, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs something. I'm grateful for the neighbors who eventually found their voices, for the county officials who did their jobs with integrity, and for people like Tom and Mark who reminded me that truth still carries weight. And I'm grateful to everyone listening to this story, because sharing these experiences matters. It reminds us that ordinary people can push back against unfair systems and win. If this story proves anything, it's that you don't need to be powerful to be right. You just need the truth, the patience to see it through, and the courage to protect the people around you. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button to HOA Update. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from?